A poor waitress handed her jacket to the beggar. The next day, the same man, now wearing an expensive suit, showed up at her house with a request that changed everything. The small diner where Emily worked had old vinyl seats and a greasy counter. Each night, she stayed later than scheduled, wiping tables and stacking chipped plates. She earned low wages, but she needed every dollar to pay her bills. On this cold winter evening in Chicago, she finished her shift with aching feet. The owner had reminded her that business was slow this season, which worried her. Emily removed her apron, hung it on a hook, and stepped outside into the cold. The wind bit her face, and she pulled her worn jacket tight around her shoulders. She planned to walk home as usual, facing several blocks of dimly lit streets. She could not afford a taxi, and the train stop was too far away. She lived in a small apartment building with thin walls and unreliable heat. Each month, she struggled to pay rent, and she had fallen behind on utilities. Her dream was to finish her education, but she could not afford tuition now. She had dropped out of community college after losing her mother, her only family. Without any support, she worked long hours to survive in a tough city. Tonight, her back hurt, and her eyes were tired from strain and lack of sleep. She thought about the long walk ahead, the freezing wind, and her thin gloves. The thought of her bills waiting at home made her chest feel heavy. As she started walking, she felt hunger, but decided to save her remaining groceries. Heating her apartment was expensive, and sometimes she sacrificed warmth for enough food. She considered buying a cheaper meal, but then remembered the overdue electric bill. She sighed quietly and continued, her steps echoing on the empty sidewalk. It was dark, and the streetlights flickered, making it feel even colder. She tightened her scarf, worn thin from many winters, and pressed on. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, who had always encouraged her to be kind. Her mother's death still hurt, leaving Emily with no family and little guidance. But Emily tried to remain gentle and compassionate, qualities her mother valued. As she rounded a corner, she saw her apartment building at the far end. The structure was old, paint peeling, windows drafty, and hallways smelling of mold. She climbed the steps every day with a sense of dread, but no choice. Today, she stopped under a streetlight before reaching home and looked around. This was her life now, and she wondered how long she could endure it. At least she still had a job, though the owner hinted at cutting shifts. If her hours were reduced, she would struggle even more to afford rent. She considered her options, but none seemed promising. No savings, no family, no degree. She tried not to let despair take over, focusing on getting through each day. In her apartment, she flipped a switch, and a dim bulb lit the space. Her living area was cramped, with a mattress in one corner and a small table. She had a few worn clothes, a stack of unpaid bills, and some old textbooks. She ate a simple meal, heating water for instant soup on a small hot plate. The room felt cold, even with a blanket draped over her shoulders. She checked her wallet. A few dollars, some coins, not much else. Next to it lay a photograph of her mother smiling, a reminder of better times. Emily remembered her mother's encouraging words. Work hard, be kind, never give up. She wondered if kindness alone could change anything now. Eventually, she climbed into bed, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. The wind outside rattled the window pane, and she shivered, wishing for better insulation. Tomorrow would be another long day, another shift, another walk in the cold. She drifted off to sleep with thoughts of bills, rent, and uncertainty. The night passed slowly, and morning arrived with gray light seeping through the curtains. Emily woke up stiff, her breath visible in the chilly room. She dressed in the same uniform, the fabric faded from many washes. The diner opened early, and she had to hurry if she wanted to keep her job. She ate a slice of bread and prepared to leave, adjusting her old jacket. The rent deadline approached and her anxiety grew, but she pressed forward. Outside, the wind cut through her clothes, making her eyes water. She passed familiar corners and graffiti-covered walls, feeling the routine weigh on her. At the diner, customers were few, and the owner frowned at empty tables. Emily poured coffee for a lone customer, cleaned counters, and waited for a rush that never came. During her break, she heard the owner mumbling about reducing staff hours. Emily felt a pang of fear, but she kept working, wiping every surface thoroughly. When her shift ended, she braced herself to walk home in the dark again. Stepping outside, the temperature had dropped even more and her jacket felt thin. She thought about how much colder it would be after a few more weeks of winter. As she turned a corner, she noticed a figure sitting on the sidewalk. The person wore dirty clothes and seemed to be shivering, head bowed. Emily slowed her pace, unsure if she should approach, but concern grew inside her. She had very little, but this person seemed to have even less. Carefully, she stepped closer and saw his thin shoulders trembling in the cold wind. Her jacket was old and not very warm, but it was all she had. Yet something told her she had to do something. She knelt down, pulling her jacket off, and gently placed it around him. "You need this more than I do," she said, speaking softly. The man looked up, surprised, his eyes filled with gratitude. Emily stood up, now only in her shirt, feeling the cold bite her. She did not wait for thanks. She simply continued her walk home. Without a jacket, the wind felt harsh, but inside she felt a strange warmth. At her apartment door, she paused, thinking about what she had done. It was a small act, but it made her feel human and kind. She entered the building and climbed the stairs to her apartment. In the dim light, she prepared to sleep, still cold, but somehow lighter inside. The night passed slowly again, but this time she felt a quiet pride. She had almost nothing, yet she shared what little she had. In the silence, she hoped that kindness might lead to something better. Soon, she drifted into an uneasy sleep, uncertain of what tomorrow might bring. She felt hunger in her stomach, but she had no extra food. She wrapped herself in the blanket and closed her eyes. Her mind returned to the man on the sidewalk, wondering who he was. Perhaps tomorrow she would see him again, or maybe never. Either way, she knew she had done something right today. It brought her a sense of purpose, however small. Early the next morning, Emily woke up shivering in her small apartment. She felt the absence of her jacket as soon as she stood up. She rubbed her arms and tried to warm herself with a cup of weak coffee. Her thoughts returned to the man she had helped last night. She wondered if he was still on that sidewalk, or if he had moved on. Despite the cold in her apartment, she felt a quiet satisfaction inside. She had done something good, and no one could take that away. As she left for work, she saw a black luxury car parked outside. She assumed it belonged to someone else in the building, maybe a visitor. She stepped onto the sidewalk and noticed that the man from last night was gone. She hoped he found a warmer place to spend the morning. She continued to the diner, pulling her sleeves down to cover her wrists. Inside the diner, her boss looked worried about the lack of customers. He said nothing about cutting hours, but his expression suggested it might happen soon. Emily tried to be productive, wiping counters and arranging napkins, keeping her mind busy. A few regular customers arrived, mostly silent, sipping coffee and reading newspapers. She served them politely, refilling their cups and asking if they needed anything else. Later, a neighbor from her building entered the diner and greeted her quietly. The neighbor mentioned seeing a well-dressed man outside their apartment building earlier that morning. The man had asked about Emily, using her name. Emily froze, confused and slightly anxious, wondering why a stranger would look for her. She considered the possibility that it could be someone collecting a debt, but she had none. Or maybe a salesman, although that seemed unlikely. She tried to focus on her work, but the thought lingered in her mind. Why would a well-dressed man be interested in her? After her shift ended, She decided to walk home as usual, keeping an eye out. She felt uneasy, but she could not afford to ignore her responsibilities. The streets were still cold, the wind still biting, and she missed her jacket. Yet she felt no regret about giving it away to that man. As she approached her building, she noticed the black luxury car again. This time, a well-dressed man stood beside it, looking in her direction. Her heart pounded, and she considered walking past him, but he stepped forward calmly. He introduced himself as Richard Langston, and he said he had been waiting for her. Emily stared at him, surprised. She recognized his face, the shape of his jaw. It was the same man she had given her jacket to the night before. He was not dressed in rags now. He wore a fine suit and polished shoes. Emily felt confused and suspicious. She asked him why he had pretended to be homeless. Richard explained that he was testing people's kindness. He wanted to see who would help. Most people ignored him or judged him, but Emily had shown compassion without hesitation. He thanked her for her kindness and said he wanted to offer her something in return. Emily stood still, unsure if she should trust him. He pulled out a check with a generous amount and held it out to her. She hesitated. Money was tempting, but she barely knew him. Richard told her he had been disappointed by how people treated others in need. Emily's action reminded him that empathy still existed. He wanted to reward that. She asked him what he expected from her. He said nothing, only to accept help. He also offered her a job in his company, a way to improve her situation. Emily felt overwhelmed. Was this too good to be true? She had reasons to doubt. In her past, people promised help, but left her disappointed. She did not trust easily. She looked at his face, searching for signs of dishonesty, but found none. He appeared sincere, explaining that he valued true kindness, not forced charity. Emily asked if she would lose her independence. He said no. He only wanted to give her a chance to rise above her struggles. After a long pause, Emily said she would consider his offer but needed time. Richard nodded, respecting her caution. He gave her his card and told her to call. Then he wished her a good evening and left, the car driving away quietly. Emily climbed the stairs to her apartment, her mind spinning with possibilities. Inside, she examined the check. It could pay off her debts and fix her heater. But what if this was a trick or a way to exploit her trust? She considered ripping it up, but that would not solve her current problems. She remembered the cold nights, the unpaid bills, the constant pressure on her life. If he was genuine, this could change everything. Emily decided to test Richard's sincerity by asking more questions. The next day, she would meet him again and see if he was honest. She placed the check in a drawer, careful to keep it safe. She looked around her apartment, thinking about what a better job could mean. It might mean stable income, no more fear of losing heat or skipping meals. It might mean the chance to return to school someday. Emily felt hope and fear mixed together, uncertain but curious. She knew that trust was hard after her past disappointments, but maybe this was real. Before sleeping, she thought of her mother's advice about kindness and hard work. Her mother would want her to be cautious but not to reject a real opportunity. Emily decided to talk to Richard more. If he turned out to be trustworthy, fine. If not, at least she tried. She lay down, pulling the blanket tight. The cold still bothered her, but hope warmed her inside. The night passed slowly, and morning would bring another chance to understand his intentions. Emily was ready to ask the right questions and protect herself if needed. As she closed her eyes, she imagined a life where she did not struggle every day. That life felt distant, but now maybe it was closer than she ever imagined. She would move carefully, step by step, and see if this new path was real. When she woke up next morning, she planned to meet him again and decide. For now, she slept, holding on to the smallest spark of optimism. The world outside remained cold and uncertain, but inside her heart, something had changed. She was no longer just a struggling waitress, but a person with a potential opportunity. Only time would tell if she had chosen wisely. That was enough for tonight, giving her a reason to dream again. She sat up once more, checking the drawer to ensure the check was still there. Satisfied, she lay down again, determined to face tomorrow's conversation with courage. Outside, the wind pressed against the window, and Emily prepared for change. She closed her eyes. The next morning, Emily left her apartment earlier than usual. She carried the business card Richard had given her, holding it firmly in her hand. She wanted to find out if he was honest, so she decided to call and arrange a meeting. The street outside was quiet, and the cold air stung her face, but she pushed forward, determined to understand his intentions. She stopped at a small cafe near the diner and used the payphone inside. She dialed the number on the card and waited. A clear, professional voice answered. Emily asked for Richard Langston, and the person on the other end said he was available. After a brief hold, Richard's calm voice greeted her. She identified herself, and he sounded pleased to hear from her. She asked if they could meet in a neutral place, perhaps the lobby of a nearby hotel. He agreed without hesitation and suggested a well-known hotel about 3 blocks away. Emily said she would be there in an hour. Emily ended the call and bought a small cup of coffee. She stood at the window, watching people walk by outside. She remembered the check in her drawer and how it could solve so many problems. She also remembered her caution and her doubts. She finished the coffee and left the cafe, heading toward the hotel. It was a modest hotel with a warm lobby. The front desk clerk gave her a polite smile as she entered. A few minutes later, Richard arrived, dressed neatly in a tailored coat and suit. He greeted her respectfully and invited her to sit in the lounge area, where comfortable chairs were arranged around a small table. Emily sat down, keeping her back straight. Richard began by thanking her again for what she did. He said that he wanted to clarify his offer and answer all her questions. Emily started by asking him why he chose to test people's kindness in that way. Richard explained that he had grown tired of empty gestures and insincere donations. He wanted to see if anyone would genuinely help a stranger in need. Most people turned away, but Emily did not. He said her simple act of sharing her jacket with him without expecting anything in return convinced him that she was the kind of person he wanted to support. Emily asked about the job he mentioned. Richard told her that he owned a company specializing in logistics and distribution. He explained that they had positions in administration, inventory management, and other entry-level roles. He assured her that she would not be required to have a college degree to start, just a willingness to learn and work hard. The salary would be fair and much better than her current wage at the diner. He also mentioned that if she proved capable, there would be opportunities to advance. Emily took a moment to consider his words, still cautious. She then asked about his motivations for helping her personally. Richard said he believed in rewarding genuine kindness. By offering her an opportunity, he hoped she could improve her life. Emily said that she did not want to rely on charity. She wanted to work and earn her way forward. Richard nodded, pleased that she did not simply expect easy money. He suggested she accept the job as a starting point. The check he gave her was a gift to relieve immediate pressure, but the job would give her independence. Emily thought about her cold apartment, her overdue bills, and the long hours at the diner. She thought about the possibility of saving money, going back to school someday, and gaining new skills. She asked Richard if she could start soon, and he said that she could begin the following week. He would arrange for her to speak with a supervisor and get an orientation. Emily agreed, deciding it was worth a try. She knew there were risks, but her situation was difficult, and this seemed like a real chance. Before leaving, Emily asked Richard if he expected something else from her. He smiled and said he did not. He only hoped she would maintain the same integrity that led her to help him that night. Emily thanked him, standing up and shaking his hand. She noticed his firm but gentle grip and his steady eye contact. He gave her an official letter with company details, the address, and a time to meet with a supervisor. Emily placed it in her bag. They parted ways outside the hotel. Emily walked home, feeling uncertain but hopeful. The streets were still cold, but now she had a plan. She would cash the check, settle her most pressing bills, and use the rest to buy a proper coat. She could not show up to a new job freezing. At her apartment, she took out the check and looked at it closely, making sure it was valid. The bank was not far, so she put on her old sweater and went outside again. At the bank, the teller confirmed the check was legitimate. Emily felt relieved and grateful. She deposited most of it into her account, withdrawing some cash to pay her landlord and settle overdue bills. She returned home and wrote a check for her rent, then called the utility company to make a payment. Her mood brightened a little. She still had to be careful with money, but at least she was no longer on the edge of losing heat and electricity. The next day, Emily went to a discount store and bought a simple but warm coat. She also picked up some gloves and a scarf, preparing for the colder weeks ahead. She considered buying new shoes but decided to wait until she started her new job and earned her first paycheck. Back in her apartment, she cleaned up a bit, feeling more in control of her life. In the following days, she worked her shifts at the diner as usual, not mentioning her future plans to anyone. The owner seemed more stressed by low customer turnout, and Emily felt a small sense of relief, knowing she would soon move on. She kept thinking about Richard's words. It all seemed genuine. She had not signed any suspicious documents, and he did not pressure her to do anything unreasonable. On her last day at the diner, she completed her shift quietly, receiving her final tips. She told the owner that she had found another opportunity and would not be returning. The owner wished her well, though he seemed a bit resigned. Emily packed her apron in her bag and walked out, feeling a mixture of sadness and excitement. She had spent many hours in that place, working hard for low pay, but now she was stepping into something new. The night before her first day at the new job, Emily tried to sleep early. She set her alarm and laid out her clothes, a simple blouse and pants, her new coat and her gloves. She would arrive on time and show them that she was reliable. She understood that this was just the beginning. She needed to prove herself, learn the tasks, and earn her place in the company. But now, she had at least a path forward. Before drifting off, she remembered the night she gave away her jacket. That simple act changed everything. It was proof that sometimes caring about others could lead to unexpected opportunities. She felt nervous and hopeful. Tomorrow, she would walk into a new environment and do her best. She closed her eyes, determined to keep moving forward. On Monday morning, Emily woke up early. She got dressed carefully, making sure her clothes were neat. She combed her hair, tied it back simply, and checked the time. She left her apartment with about half an hour to spare, since she did not want to be late on her first day. The company's office building was not far, but she had never been there before, so she allowed extra time in case she got lost. The street felt different today. The cold air still pressed against her face, but she had a warm coat now. She walked with a more confident step. After a few blocks, she reached the address written on the letter Richard had given her. The building was modern, with glass doors and a clean lobby. Emily entered, feeling slightly intimidated by the polished floors and formal atmosphere. At the reception desk, a young woman greeted her politely. Emily explained that she was starting today as a new employee. The receptionist asked for her name, then directed her to take the elevator to the 5th floor. Emily followed the instructions. The elevator was quiet, and her reflection in the metal doors reminded her to stand straight and remain calm. On the 5th floor, she stepped into a well-lit space with open workstations and a few private offices. Several employees were already working at their desks, typing or talking on the phone. A man approached her and introduced himself as David, the supervisor Richard had mentioned. He had a friendly smile and shook her hand warmly. Emily returned the greeting, feeling slightly less nervous. David guided her to a small meeting room to go over basic procedures. He explained the company's role in coordinating shipments between warehouses and retail clients. He told her about the computer system they used for tracking inventory and deliveries. He said that at first, her responsibilities would be simple: entering data, confirming delivery times, and learning the basic order management software. Emily listened carefully, trying to absorb everything. David handed her some printed materials that explained how to use the software and how to follow the company's standard procedures. He said she would have a few days to get comfortable before taking on more challenging tasks. Emily appreciated this gradual approach. After the short orientation, he walked her to a desk near the window. It had a computer, a notepad, and a telephone. "This will be your workstation," David said. As Emily settled into her chair, she noticed a few curious glances from nearby co-workers. She tried not to overthink it. They probably wondered who the new person was. Instead of feeling insecure, she focused on the screen as David showed her how to log in and navigate the system. She followed his instructions, inputting some test data. It was not complicated, but it required attention to detail. Emily liked the idea of working indoors in a stable environment. It was very different from rushing around in the diner. During a short break, she walked to the break room to get some water. 2 employees were discussing a recent project, and they nodded politely at her. She nodded back, not wanting to interrupt. She wondered if they knew how she got the job. Richard had said nothing about making her story public, so maybe they just assumed she was a regular new hire. Back at her desk, Emily began working through a small list of tasks David had assigned. She checked order confirmations and delivery schedules for a set of clients. The system required careful reading, but not much advanced skill. As she worked, she realized this could become routine quickly. However, routine did not bother her. Steady work would allow her to pay her bills, stay warm, and maybe save for classes later. Around midday, David stopped by to see how she was doing. She told him she was fine, just taking her time to understand everything. He seemed satisfied. He mentioned that if she had any questions, she could ask him or a few other people on the team. Emily thanked him and returned to her tasks, feeling grateful for the guidance. Later in the afternoon, one co-worker introduced herself as Andrea. She seemed curious, but polite. Andrea asked if Emily had previous experience in office work. Emily admitted that she came from a different background and had worked in a diner. Andrea smiled and said that everyone started somewhere. She offered to help if Emily ever got stuck with a process. Emily appreciated the offer, feeling slightly more at ease. The hours passed, and Emily completed her first assignments. She felt a sense of accomplishment, small but genuine. She recalled how uncertain she felt just a few days ago. Now she had a stable environment and a job that paid better. When it was time to go home, she shut down her computer and said goodbye to David, who wished her a good evening. Outside, the air was still cold, but Emily walked home feeling different. She had survived the first day. No one treated her poorly or made her feel unwelcome. She saw opportunities to learn new skills and improve her position over time. This was her first step away from a life where every dollar felt like a struggle. At her apartment, she heated a simple meal and thought about her schedule. She still had evenings free. Maybe soon she could look into online classes or night school. She could start small, perhaps improving her computer skills or taking a business course. The idea excited her. She remembered that Richard had not asked for anything in return. He gave her a starting point and expected her to make use of it. She intended to prove that she deserved this chance. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Emily arrived on time, worked through her assignments, and tried to learn something new each day. Andrea and another co-worker, Julian, offered help now and then. She noticed a few people still looked at her with mild curiosity, but no one caused her trouble. David occasionally checked in, and when he saw her improving, he gave her a bit more responsibility, step by step. By the end of the week, Emily understood the basics of her job. She knew how to navigate the software and felt comfortable with the daily tasks. She was not fully settled yet, but she had made progress. Her bank account was healthier, her apartment was warmer, and her stress level had decreased. That night, after finishing a small dinner, she listed her short-term goals. Keep learning at work, pay all her bills on time, and start looking at local colleges for night classes. Maybe she could finish her degree in the future. As she prepared for bed, Emily thought again about the moment she offered her jacket to the stranger. At the time, she had no idea he was a wealthy man. She did not know it would lead to a new job and a new outlook on life. Yet it happened. She felt grateful that her kindness was recognized and rewarded. Most of all, she felt proud that she had taken the risk and trusted herself. Emily closed her eyes, aware that many challenges still lay ahead. She would have to prove herself at work, manage her finances carefully, and slowly build the life she wanted. But now she had a stable foundation and a bit of hope. That was more than she had before. She slept soundly, ready to continue forward. Over the next few days, Emily settled into her routine at the company. She arrived early, took notes, and tried to understand how different departments worked together. She remembered the diner, where each day felt uncertain and physically tiring. Here, her tasks required concentration, but did not leave her body aching at the end of the day. She no longer came home with sore feet and an empty wallet. Emily learned more about the shipping schedules and inventory systems. Each order had to be recorded accurately, and late deliveries had to be tracked. At first, she found the process a bit confusing, but David and Andrea were patient. Andrea explained how different clients required special instructions. Sometimes the warehouse numbers changed, or a client requested a different delivery window. Emily wrote everything down and asked questions whenever something was unclear. Outside of work, Emily managed to pay all her utility bills on time this month. The relief of not worrying about the heat was immense. She returned home to a warmer apartment and was able to cook simple, nutritious meals. She considered signing up for a basic computer skills course at a local community center. With her more stable schedule, she could attend evening classes and improve her abilities. This might help her advance at the company later. At the office, Emily noticed that not everyone was welcoming at first. There were a few co-workers who seemed curious but distant. She sensed they were wondering how she got this job so quickly. One afternoon, a man named Peter passed by her desk and made a casual remark. "Not many people start here without prior experience." Emily smiled politely and said she was learning everything from scratch. Peter nodded, but seemed puzzled. Emily did not feel the need to explain her story to everyone. She focused on doing her job well. When a small problem occurred with a delivery schedule, she asked Andrea for help and then worked through the issue herself. The next time something similar happened, Emily fixed it on her own. She felt proud when David thanked her for handling the situation smoothly. After her first full week, Emily received her first paycheck. The amount was higher than what she earned at the diner, and it felt good to deposit it into her bank account. She decided to buy a few things she needed, like a second pair of shoes suitable for an office environment. She also picked up some healthier groceries. Having a bit more financial stability eased her constant worry. One evening, as she was leaving the office, she saw Richard in the hallway. He greeted her, asking how things were going. Emily said that she was adjusting well and learning quickly. Richard told her he was glad to hear that and encouraged her to keep up the good work. She thanked him for the opportunity, and he simply nodded, not making a big deal out of it. It was a short conversation, but it reassured her that he was still interested in her progress. A few days later, Andrea invited Emily to join her and another coworker for a coffee break. They sat in a corner of the break room, talking casually about weekend plans. Emily felt included and comfortable. She mentioned she might take an evening class to improve her computer skills. Andrea thought it was a great idea, and the other co-worker, Julian, said learning new skills was always helpful. At home, Emily wrote down her short-term goals on a piece of paper. She wanted to become more proficient with the company's software, enroll in at least one community course, and save a small amount of money each month. She still had to be careful with expenses, but it felt less like a desperate struggle now. She put the list on her table to remind herself of her plans. The cold weather continued outside, but it no longer felt like such a threat. Emily had a steady job, a decent coat, and a growing sense of security. She reflected on her past difficulties. Just a short time ago, she had been worried about how to pay for heat. Now she focused on improving herself and moving forward. It was a subtle shift, but it mattered a lot. At work, David began assigning her slightly more complex tasks. He asked her to compare shipping costs between different routes and to summarize the results. Emily took her time, double-checking each figure. When she handed him the summary, he said it looked good and that her careful attention to detail was appreciated. She felt valued, something she rarely felt at the diner. During a lunch break, Emily overheard a few co-workers discussing how hard it was to find trustworthy employees these days. She remembered Richard's test and realized that trust had played a big role in her being here. She had helped a stranger on the street, and that stranger turned out to be a powerful man who valued honest kindness. She did not regret her choice. She believed that genuine compassion was worth it, even without a reward. Occasionally, Emily thought about the risks she took by accepting Richard's offer. She had no guarantees at first, but now it seemed real and stable. She felt grateful, but also determined to stand on her own 2 feet. She would use this opportunity, not waste it. In the following week, Andrea complimented Emily on how quickly she adapted. "You seem calm and reliable," Andrea said. Emily thanked her. She admitted she was still learning, but Andrea said everyone learns on the job. This small vote of confidence made Emily feel welcome. As the days passed, Emily saved a little money and signed up for a basic computer course in the evening. It required attending class twice a week. She cleared it with David, making sure it did not interfere with her work hours. He had no problem with it. In fact, he said that improving her skills could help her take on more responsibilities in the future. At home, Emily marked her class schedule on the calendar. She was building a routine that included work, learning, and caring for herself. She no longer felt trapped by debt and desperation. Instead, she felt challenged but supported. She still remembered her mother's advice. Be kind, work hard, and never give up. Now she understood that kindness could open doors, and hard work kept them open. Emily did not know what the future would hold, but she knew she was making progress. She finished her tasks on time, got along with co-workers, and even managed to handle small problems independently. She was proving herself, one day at a time. A few weeks after starting at the company, Emily began her evening computer course. The classes took place in a local community center, just a short bus ride from her apartment. In these classes, she learned more about spreadsheet functions, document formatting, and basic project organization. She found it easier than expected, probably because she was motivated to learn skills that could help her at work. At the office, Emily noticed that people gradually stopped giving her curious looks. She had become part of the daily rhythm, handling routine tasks and occasional problems without causing trouble. One morning, David asked her to help with a larger project. He wanted her to gather data from a few weeks of shipments and organize it into a clear report. Emily agreed, feeling a small surge of confidence. As she worked on the report, she applied some of the skills she learned in her evening class. She used spreadsheets more effectively and made sure each figure was accurate. When she finished, David reviewed it and gave her a nod of approval. He said the report was straightforward and well-structured. Emily felt proud. She was contributing something useful, not just following instructions. At lunch, Andrea asked Emily how she found the job. Emily hesitated but decided to keep it simple. She said she had met someone who recognized her potential and offered her a position. She did not mention the jacket or the test, guessing it might raise too many questions. Andrea seemed satisfied with that answer and did not push further. Over time, Emily began to form a quiet friendship with Andrea and Julian. They sometimes invited her to join them for lunch at a nearby sandwich shop. During these breaks, they talked about everyday things, local events, plans for the weekend, or small concerns about work. Emily enjoyed these moments of normal conversation. It made her feel more settled. One afternoon, Emily discovered a small error in a shipment log. Instead of ignoring it, she brought it to David's attention and suggested a correction. He thanked her for the honesty and asked her to double-check a few other entries. Emily spent extra time ensuring the records were correct. She understood that being reliable and thorough could earn trust, just as much as kindness could. When Emily received her next paycheck, she saw that her careful budgeting paid off. She had managed to set aside a small amount of savings. It was not much, but it was a start. She considered buying some new clothes for work. Her current outfits were decent but limited. With a few extra pieces, she could look more professional. At the community center classes, Emily improved her typing speed and learned shortcuts for common tasks. These might seem like small improvements, but she knew they could help her handle data more efficiently at work. After class, she sometimes studied the course materials at home, determined to get better. The winter in Chicago remained harsh, but Emily's apartment was warm now. She paid her bills on time and even bought a small space heater for extra comfort. She realized how far she had come in a short period. Before, every day felt like a struggle. Now she had stability and a sense of direction. Emily thought about Richard sometimes. He had not contacted her again since their brief hallway exchange, but he did not need to. He gave her the opportunity, and now she was making use of it. She was not sure if he monitored her progress, but she acted as if he might. She wanted to show that his trust was not misplaced. A few weeks later, David announced a team meeting. He wanted to discuss the upcoming season and potential changes in the way they managed orders. Emily listened attentively. He mentioned that the company planned to expand its warehouse capacity, which would mean more complex schedules. He asked the team if anyone had ideas to improve their current methods. Emily hesitated, then suggested a clearer labeling system in the spreadsheets. She said that color-coding certain columns and adding short descriptions for each client order could reduce confusion. David considered her idea, and Andrea nodded, saying it might help. David said he would think about implementing it. Emily felt good about contributing her thoughts. When the meeting ended, Andrea smiled at Emily. "You're settling in nicely," Andrea said. Emily thanked her, feeling more confident about her place here. She realized that she was no longer just an outsider. She was part of the team, offering solutions and improving the workflow. At the community center, the instructor praised Emily's improvement in handling documents. Emily realized that hard work and steady effort were paying off. She planned to sign up for an additional course later, maybe something related to business communication. She wanted to keep growing and learning. One weekend, Emily stayed home and organized her small apartment. She cleaned the corners she usually ignored and rearranged her few pieces of furniture to make the space feel more comfortable. With the heater running, the apartment no longer felt so bleak. She placed her course materials neatly in a folder and made a small corner for studying. She also checked her finances again, setting goals for the next month. She wanted to maintain her job performance, complete her course successfully, and maybe research affordable classes at a local college. It would take time and patience, but she believed she could do it now. The anxiety that once weighed on her had eased. Back at work, Julian asked Emily if she would consider helping him double-check an important client's data. She agreed, and they worked quietly side by side. He showed her a few shortcuts he used, and she shared a few things she learned in her class. It felt good to collaborate, exchanging tips and information. Emily understood that her path was not guaranteed to be easy. She still had challenges, and the company might have new demands in the future. But for now, she was on stable ground. Each time she walked into the office, she felt more prepared. She no longer worried that people would question her presence. She had earned her spot through consistent effort. After another successful week, Emily sat in her apartment and thought about how kindness and hard work had combined in her life. She had offered her jacket to a stranger, never expecting a reward. That stranger turned out to be someone who offered her a real chance. She took that chance and built upon it step by step. She embraced the training, did her job well, and improved her skills. Now she saw a future that held possibilities instead of constant struggles. Emily slept soundly that night, aware that the seasons would change eventually, and maybe her role at the company would grow too. She knew she had more to learn, more to prove, and more goals to set. But tonight she felt calm and focused. She was no longer trapped by her past difficulties, but free to move forward in a world that had opened up after a single act of kindness. Emily continued her daily routine at the company. Each morning, she arrived a few minutes before her shift started. She turned on her computer, reviewed the day's tasks, and planned how to handle them efficiently. She no longer felt nervous when she opened her email or checked the order management system. She had learned how things worked, and each day brought fewer surprises. Andrea often asked Emily if she needed help, but Emily now managed most tasks on her own. Julian sometimes collaborated with her on larger projects, and they worked well together. Emily noticed that Peter, who once made a comment about her lack of experience, seemed to respect her more now. He did not say much, but he no longer gave her puzzled looks. Over time, people accepted that Emily was a reliable part of the team. David recognized Emily's steady improvement and gave her slightly more complex assignments. He asked her to help prepare a monthly performance summary, something usually reserved for employees who had been with the company longer. Emily agreed and spent extra time reviewing old reports and learning what details were important. She created clear tables and short explanations, making sure everything was correct before submitting it. David thanked her, noting that her contribution saved him time. Outside of work, Emily finished her first basic computer course at the community center. She received a small certificate of completion, which she carefully tucked away at home. She immediately signed up for another course focused on business communication. Learning how to write clearer emails and memos would help her present her ideas more effectively at work. Emily believed every skill she gained would open more doors. Her apartment was now comfortable. She had rearranged her furniture so that there was a small corner for reading and studying. She also managed to buy a simple bookshelf for her course materials and a few reference books. Sitting in her chair with a warm lamp nearby, Emily felt calm and focused. She had come a long way from struggling to heat her apartment and worrying about every dollar. At work, people started treating Emily as a regular colleague rather than just the new person. Andrea invited her to join a small group lunch at a casual cafe. During this lunch, they talked about their personal interests. Emily learned that Andrea enjoyed cooking, Julian liked to watch old movies, and another co-worker, Sarah, enjoyed indoor gardening. Emily shared that she was taking classes to improve her skills. They seemed impressed by her dedication. A few days later, David called Emily into his office. He said that a new batch of clients would require careful monitoring and asked if Emily would be willing to oversee their accounts. He explained that it was not a promotion exactly, but it was a sign of trust. Emily felt a surge of confidence and agreed, saying she would do her best. David said he believed in her abilities. As Emily took on these client accounts, she organized her notes and created a simple checklist to ensure she did not miss any details. She handled emails politely and clearly, confirming delivery dates and checking inventory levels. On one occasion, a client requested a sudden change in their delivery window. Emily calmly adjusted the schedule and informed the warehouse team. The process went smoothly, and the client thanked her for the quick response. After this success, Emily realized that her contribution was real. She was no longer just helping. She was managing responsibilities and ensuring the company maintained a good relationship with clients. This gave her a sense of pride and stability. She had not expected to reach this level so soon. She thought about Richard and how his trust and generosity had started this chain of events. One evening, as Emily returned home, she felt tired but satisfied. She paid all her bills for the month and still had some savings left. She considered adding more classes to her schedule, but decided to pace herself. She wanted to do well at work and continue improving at a reasonable pace. Eventually, she might take a course related to logistics or supply chain management. She was learning that the industry had many layers, and understanding more could help her advance. Emily also realized that the fear and desperation that once gripped her were gone. Before, she had felt trapped by circumstances, doubting if life could improve. Now she had proof that effort and kindness mattered. Still, she kept her expectations realistic. She knew that life could be unpredictable, and she wanted to remain prepared and flexible. At the office, a minor crisis tested her abilities. A supplier was late with a delivery, and it threatened to delay shipments to several clients. Emily gathered the information and contacted David to discuss options. She suggested adjusting a few schedules and informing clients in advance, assuring them that the company was actively managing the situation. David agreed, and together they sent out clear communications. The clients appreciated the honesty, and the small crisis passed without major problems. Afterward, David told Emily he was impressed by her composure. Emily thanked him and said she learned from watching how others handled problems. She knew she had come a long way from the first week, when she had been uncertain about every detail. Now, she was helping solve issues instead of just following instructions. At home, Emily reflected on the difference between her old life and her new one. She used to return to a cold apartment, worried about money in the future. Now she returned to a warm space and felt a sense of achievement. She no longer felt insecure about her place in the world. This stability allowed her to think more about the future. Maybe she could return to college to finish her degree someday. During a short afternoon break at work, Emily stepped outside for fresh air. She watched the busy street and thought about how many people hurried by without looking at each other. She remembered the night she gave her jacket to that man on the sidewalk. She did not know it then, but that moment changed her life. It reminded her that simple acts of kindness could create opportunities. She hoped that in the future, she might help someone else the way Richard helped her. When she went back inside, Andrea asked if Emily would join her and Julian for a quick walk after work. Emily agreed. They strolled a few blocks, stopping at a small bakery. Over coffee and simple pastries, they chatted about everyday life. Emily realized she was forming new friendships, something she lacked before. She no longer felt isolated. This meant a lot to her. As Emily prepared for another day at work, she looked at herself in the mirror. She had changed. Not physically, but she stood straighter and looked more confident. She saw someone who had overcome difficulties and taken a chance to improve her life. She felt grateful, but also proud of her role in making it happen. With steady steps, she moved forward, ready for whatever came next. As weeks turned into a couple of months, Emily's role at the company continued to grow in subtle ways. She still worked under David's supervision, but now he trusted her to handle certain client accounts with minimal oversight. She sent regular updates to him, and he rarely needed to make corrections. This level of trust felt rewarding, confirming that she was on the right path. Emily's evenings were filled with her business communication class. She learned about professional etiquette, proper email formatting, and how to deliver clear presentations. She took notes and practiced at home, writing draft emails and memos that she never sent, just to improve her style. In time, she grew more confident in her written communication, which helped her correspond with clients more effectively. At work, Andrea occasionally asked for Emily's input on small projects. Julian shared useful tips about handling urgent requests. Even Peter, who once seemed skeptical, asked Emily once how she organized her client data. She showed him her methodical approach, and he nodded with approval. Emily realized that people now saw her as a valuable team member, someone who could provide solutions. One day, David asked Emily to sit in on a meeting with a new client. He wanted her to understand the initial setup process and learn how the company negotiated terms. Emily listened carefully, took notes, and observed how David handled questions. After the meeting, David asked Emily what she thought. She shared a few observations, and David said he appreciated her perspective. She began to see how her role could evolve over time. Perhaps she could advance beyond data entry and schedule management. Outside of work, Emily maintained her careful budget. She managed to save a bit more money each month, building a small safety net. She even considered buying a used laptop so she could practice her computer skills at home and maybe explore online resources. She searched for a good deal and eventually found a simple but reliable laptop within her price range. Owning this laptop allowed her to study more at home and consider online courses in the future. The winter was still cold, but Emily no longer feared the weather. Her apartment stayed warm, and she had a decent coat. Her life felt stable. She remembered how difficult it had been to simply get through each day. Now she could think beyond immediate survival. She could plan for the next season, the next step in her education, and maybe, eventually, the completion of her degree. At the office, Emily noticed that Richard occasionally passed by in the halls. He was often busy, talking on the phone or heading to a meeting. He rarely stopped to chat, but once he caught her eye and gave her a small nod. Emily understood that he was acknowledging her progress without intruding. She respected that. She liked that he trusted her to succeed on her own terms. As Emily's responsibilities grew, she faced a few challenges. One client was particularly demanding and complained about minor issues. Emily responded politely, addressed their concerns, and offered solutions. After a few exchanges, the client seemed satisfied. David commended her for handling the situation professionally. Emily realized that dealing with difficult clients was part of the job. She felt glad that her communication skills were improving. One afternoon, Julian asked Emily if she would help him train a new employee who had just joined the team. Julian said the newcomer needed to learn the basic order management steps, and Emily's approach was easy to understand. Emily agreed. She spent about an hour showing the new employee how to navigate the system, enter orders, and confirm delivery dates. The new employee thanked her, looking relieved. Emily remembered her own first days and how nervous she had felt. It felt good to help someone else now. After work, Andrea and Emily walked to the bus stop together. Andrea commented that Emily seemed more confident than ever. Emily thanked her, explaining that each success made her believe in herself more. Andrea said she appreciated Emily's calm demeanor, which helped keep everyone focused. Emily never imagined she would be seen as a stabilizing force. In the past, she'd felt uncertain and fragile. Now she felt strong and reliable. At home, Emily used her new laptop to research local colleges. She wanted to see what kind of programs were available, part-time or in the evenings. She discovered a community college that offered flexible courses in business administration. She made a note to consider this in the future, when she had saved enough money and felt ready to commit to a longer course of study. Emily still remembered the night she gave away her jacket. She understood that her kindness led her to this opportunity. Yet, she also realized that it was her hard work and determination that allowed her to seize that opportunity. Richard had opened a door, but Emily had chosen to walk through it. She had learned to trust herself, something she struggled with before. Work continued smoothly. Emily handled her client accounts, updated reports for David, and supported her colleagues. She occasionally offered suggestions on how to streamline certain processes. Sometimes David implemented her ideas, and sometimes he did not, but he always thanked her for contributing. One evening, after her business communication class, Emily reviewed her notes from the workday. She thought about how different her life was now. She had a stable job, supportive colleagues, and a growing set of skills. She no longer had to choose between heating her apartment and eating a decent meal. She felt secure enough to dream about future goals, like completing a degree. As she lay down to sleep, she thought about her next steps. Maybe next month she would enroll in a short business course online. Maybe she would ask David for a bit more responsibility to prepare herself for advancement. She might also consider improving her writing even further, aiming to write internal memos or external communications at a higher level. Whatever she decided, she knew she had come far. The calm that now filled her evenings replaced the tension that once kept her awake. She could rest knowing that tomorrow would not be a desperate struggle, but another opportunity to learn and grow. Emily closed her eyes, confident that she belonged where she was and that she could shape her own future. She would keep working, keep learning, and keep building the life she wanted. Each small step counted, and each day brought her closer to her long-term goals. Now, she no longer felt like life was happening to her. She felt like she was actively participating, making decisions, and moving forward with purpose. In the following weeks, Emily felt her confidence grow stronger. She managed her client accounts smoothly, updated schedules, and communicated changes to warehouses with ease. The once daunting system of orders and inventory now felt familiar. When small issues arose, Emily handled them calmly. Her colleagues trusted her judgment, and David rarely had to intervene. Emily continued attending her evening courses. After completing her business communication class, she enrolled in a short course on basic project coordination. She knew that understanding how to plan tasks, set milestones, and track progress would help her if she took on bigger responsibilities at the company. Each skill she learned made her more prepared for a future where she might lead projects or manage a team. At work, David occasionally stopped by her desk to ask for her input on small improvements. Emily suggested a few adjustments to how they labeled shipment categories. David accepted her suggestion, and the new labels reduced confusion among the team. It felt good to know her ideas could help everyone work more efficiently. Andrea and Julian remained friendly and supportive. They invited Emily to join them for a casual dinner after work one evening. Over simple meals at a small diner, they talked about their hopes for the future. Andrea mentioned wanting to move to a bigger apartment and perhaps start a small side business selling homemade baked goods. Julian talked about saving money to travel next year. When they asked Emily about her plans, she admitted she wanted to return to college eventually. She wanted to earn a proper degree that could open more doors in her career. They encouraged her, saying she had the determination to succeed. That night, Emily reflected on how her life had changed. She once felt alone and unsure if she would ever break the cycle of financial struggle. Now she had a support network, financial stability, and a sense of direction. She understood that reaching her long-term goals would take time. She might need to save money for tuition and balance her work schedule with classes. But for once, the idea of facing these challenges did not scare her. It simply felt like a series of steps she could take when ready. At the office, Emily continued to help the new employee Julian had introduced to her. The newcomer progressed quickly with Emily's guidance and soon needed less assistance. One afternoon, the newcomer thanked Emily for her patience and clear explanations. Emily smiled, recalling how important supportive guidance had been for her in the early days of her new job. Helping others gave her a sense of satisfaction. Outside, the weather slowly began to shift toward a slightly milder season. The intense cold eased, and the streets felt a bit more welcoming. Emily did not depend on the weather to determine her mood anymore. Her sense of well-being came from knowing she could handle whatever came her way. Richard appeared in the hallway one morning and stopped by Emily's desk briefly. He asked her how she was doing and if she enjoyed her work. Emily said she did. She mentioned she was taking courses in the evening to improve her skills and considering finishing her degree in the future. Richard nodded, looking genuinely pleased. He said he admired her motivation and that it confirmed his belief in her character. After this brief exchange, he continued on his way, busy as always. That evening, Emily sat at her small desk at home, reviewing course materials. She studied project coordination basics, making notes and thinking of ways to apply them at work. She also researched local colleges, checking tuition fees and schedules. She knew she could not enroll right away, but she wanted to be informed. Knowledge helped her feel prepared. At the company, things ran smoothly. Orders were handled on time, clients were satisfied, and the team worked together efficiently. Emily noticed that David relied on her to keep certain processes running without him having to check every detail. This trust meant a lot to her. It reflected her growth from a nervous new hire to a dependable member of the team. One afternoon, Andrea told Emily that a position might open up in the department that handled resource allocation. This role involved analyzing data to predict inventory needs and optimize delivery routes. Andrea said that with Emily's growing skill set, she might be a good candidate. Emily thanked Andrea for the tip, feeling a spark of excitement. She had never considered applying for a different role, but now she realized she had options. Emily decided to take her time before making any moves. She wanted to continue learning and improving. Still, the possibility of moving up showed her that she had a future here if she chose to stay. She could also use her newfound stability as a springboard toward her educational goals. Her relationships with coworkers improved as well. She felt comfortable asking questions, sharing ideas, and offering help. People who once seemed distant now treated her as part of the team. Emily understood that trust took time, and she appreciated that she had earned it. At home, Emily updated her list of goals. She had stable finances now, so she aimed to save a specific amount each month for future tuition costs. She also planned to complete at least one more evening course before the end of the year. Every step mattered. She marked her progress in a simple notebook, reminding herself that small actions led to big changes over time. As she drifted off to sleep one night, Emily remembered her mother's words about kindness and perseverance. Back then, it was hard to imagine how kindness could lead to a better life. But now she saw that helping others and maintaining integrity created opportunities. She felt grateful for the path she had taken and confident that she could continue moving forward. Emily woke up feeling calm and focused. It was a work day, but unlike before, she did not feel dread or exhaustion. She felt ready. She dressed neatly, had a light breakfast, and headed out. The streets were no longer intimidating. Her stable job, supportive environment, and personal growth had changed how she viewed the world around her. At the office, she took her seat and checked the day's assignments. Everything seemed in order. She confirmed delivery times for a few clients, updated some records, and sent a concise memo about a minor schedule change. Her communication skills had improved significantly. Each email was clear and direct, something she learned from her evening classes. David approached her desk to discuss a new request from a key client. They wanted monthly summaries presented in a more visual format. David asked if Emily could look into simple charts or graphs. Emily agreed, recalling some of the basic tools she learned in her computer courses. She spent the next hour experimenting with chart features to present the data in a more understandable way. When she showed David the draft, he smiled and said it would definitely help clients grasp the information quickly. During lunch, Andrea, Julian, and Emily sat together. They talked about weekend plans and small personal goals. Andrea mentioned trying a new recipe, Julian talked about visiting a friend, and Emily said she might attend a workshop on effective time management at the community center. They teased her gently about always learning something new, but in a friendly way. Emily smiled. She knew that each new skill helped her shape her future. That afternoon, Emily received a call from a client who wanted to confirm a last-minute change. She handled it smoothly, reassured them, and updated the system accordingly. After hanging up, she realized that she no longer felt anxious talking to clients. Confidence came from knowing she could solve problems. She walked to the break room for a cup of water and thought about how far she had come. She remembered standing in the cold streets after giving her jacket away. She never imagined it would lead her here. Yet, that act of kindness had been a turning point. By showing compassion, she connected with Richard, who opened a door she never knew existed. But more importantly, she walked through that door herself, working hard and learning new skills every day. In the late afternoon, David called a brief team meeting. He wanted to highlight some improvements and thank everyone for their contributions. He mentioned Emily's role in organizing data and helping with client communications. He said her reliability made his job easier. Emily felt a quiet pride. She looked around at her coworkers who nodded and smiled. She belonged here, and everyone knew it. As the workday ended, Emily gathered her belongings and said goodnight to Andrea and Julian. Walking home, she breathed in the cool air, feeling a sense of peace. Her apartment was no longer a place of struggle, but a comfortable home where she could rest, study, and plan her next steps. Inside her apartment, she prepared a simple dinner and thought about her long-term goals. She considered that maybe in the coming months, she would try to enroll in a part-time college program. She had saved some money and could manage her time more effectively now. Her job provided stability, and if she advanced further, she could save even more. Emily sat at her small table, reviewing her budget. She saw that she had reached a point where continuing her education was possible. She might need to adjust her schedule, but she was used to balancing responsibilities. She was not in a hurry, though. She could take one class at a time, step by step, just as she had done with her evening courses. As she finished dinner, Emily thought about her journey. She had faced hardship, loneliness, and financial strain. She had lost her mother, her only family, and struggled to keep herself afloat. But through kindness, opportunity, and hard work, she changed her path. She realized that she had rebuilt her life piece by piece. Now, she could move forward with confidence. Before going to bed, Emily looked at the small bookshelf she had purchased. On it were the course materials she had studied, proof of her efforts. She remembered her old job at the diner, the cold walks home, and the feeling of uncertainty. Compared to that, her current life felt stable and hopeful. She understood that challenges would still come, but now she had the skills and mindset to face them. Emily also remembered Richard and how he respected her independence. He did not hover over her or demand constant gratitude. He simply gave her a chance. She took that chance and made the most of it. She had learned that it was not just about receiving help, but about turning help into action and growth. Now, as Emily pulled the blanket up and got comfortable, she believed in her future. She saw a path where she could continue to learn, maybe finish her degree, and keep improving at work. She understood that small acts of kindness could change lives. Her kindness had changed Richard's view of people, and Richard's trust had changed her view of herself. Emily closed her eyes, thinking of the possibilities ahead. She felt prepared and capable. The cold nights that once made her shiver now reminded her of how far she had come. Tomorrow she would return to the office, continue doing her job well, and keep looking for ways to grow. She would take one step at a time, confident that each step mattered.